Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup. I'm your humble host, Steve A's, and that's talent on loan from Kolob. Every week, my crew and I, we ruminated on the great and spacious beehive, so thanks so much for joining us to discuss the contemporary events in Mormonism. This is March 24th, and this is episode 112. The Relief Society Conference has generated a great deal of controversy because of a clip that talks about the power of women in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's gone viral. There's a lot of controversy, and you're not going to want to miss it. We're going to cover much more on this broadcast, but that is our featured news article, which we will cover at the end of the show. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm at Kolob@MormonNewsRoundup.org. That's my email address, or you can visit my website at www.MormonNewsRoundup.org. I'd like to welcome on my program my fabulous co-host, Shane. Shane, how's it going?
Great. How are you, Divez? Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you on. Now, who are you, Shane, and what are you all about?
If I were to sum up my Mormon story in 1 minute, which is ironic because most Mormon stories last several hours. I was born in 1977, Salt Lake City. From 77 to 85, I was indoctrinated into the Mormon Church. In 1985, I was baptized, a member of the church at the age of accountability, and I began paying a full tithe, starting with paying 10% of my allowance. From 85 to 96, I got a lot more indoctrination. In 96, I graduated from high school and seminary. From 97 to 99, I served a full-time missionary in the Chile Santiago East Mission. From 99 to 2010, I got a lot more indoctrination. In 2010, I was sealed for time and all eternity to the love of my life in the LA Temple. In 2013, I moved and lived in Guatemala for a year and a half. And when I moved back in 2014, we had our first child. In 2017, we had our second child, and my deconstruction began. Also, 2017, I had a breakthrough moment that caused an epistemological shift in my brain. In 2017, I did a deep dive into the true history of the Mormon Church, and I determined that it's all made up. Also in 2017, I looked deeper at Jesus as my savior and determined that such beliefs are unjustifiable. Also in 2017, I deconstructed my reasons for believing in a God and determined that they were also unjustifiable. From 2017 to 2020, I did a lot of meditation and therapy. My ward paid for our couples therapy. Shh, I don't think they want anyone to know that. In 2019 to 2022, I volunteered as a virtual support group leader for an organization called Recovering from Religion. On 4/12 of 2021, my official resignation confirmation letter came in the mail. In 2021, I began lurking on exmormon TikTok. In 2022, I started posting on exmormon TikTok. And in March of 2024, I became a co-host on Mormon News Roundup with my new friend Divez.
Well, that is the most concise 1 minute Mormon story I think that I've ever had. And we've had over 100 episodes. So you are a very organized and succinct individual, Shane.
I want to make sure we're using our time to the maximum. And so there's my Mormon story.
Now, we'll talk a little bit more about your TikTok channel later and how I came across you at the end of the show. So let's go ahead and jump into the news this week. And off the Salt Lake Tribune, right off the bat here, there's a new study that was put out by PRRI. A study shows shifting Latter-day Saint views on LGBTQ rights in particular. And Shane, according to this, the Utah-based church is in some ways an outlier on the topic when compared to other religions. What did you take away from reading this new study about LGBTQ rights in the public sphere?
Well, my first thought was, is this real? Could we possibly actually have real things to believe that the Mormon Church leads out in terms of LGBTQ rights? I'm a little incredulous, just I guess to say the least, and immediately wanted to seek further data and information on whether or not that's true.
Yeah, there's definitely conflicting information, but this is the latest study here. And I just want to highlight a couple of the takeaways from this particular study, which shows why Latter-day Saints really are very much an anomaly in many of the metrics that we are going to see here. The first one here is opposition to religiously based refusals by religious affiliation in a couple of these different PRI studies. So this is basically the percentage of people who oppose allowing a small business owner to refuse to provide products or services to gay or lesbian people if so doing violates their religious belief. And Unitarian and Universalists are very much opposed to letting small businesses put up signs or engage in anti-LGBTQ discrimination based off of religious beliefs. And Latter-day Saints, they are very much an outlier here. Only white evangelical Protestants allow businesses to discriminate against LGBTQ persons more than Latter-day Saints. We're seeing that the Mormons are really on the bottom end of the spectrum when it comes to equality here.
That makes sense to me in my experience, for sure. It's interesting when I'm up close with people and I interact with them, there's always a very soft and loving message when I speak to my believing friends. But then when it comes down to it, I feel like there's something deeper that ultimately drives the real decisions that they make. It's one of those really, really hard things for me to understand. But on the face of it, whenever I speak with people directly, it always seems like there's an apologetic response. And I always feel like people are extending love. But I just guess deeper when you get to the policies that changes.
Yeah, according to this study as well, which was just released this last week, according to the study, with an overall margin of error of less than 1%, only 3% of Latter-day Saints who affiliate themselves with the church identify as LGBTQ, and that is the lowest on the possible list. And that is in contrast to Unitarian Universalists, who are 29%, and religiously unaffiliated is 19%. It appears that Latter-day Saints, when they start to affiliate themselves and with the LGBTQ community, they immediately disaffiliate with the church. What do you think the reasons for that is, Shane?
Well, I think not only do we have what you're saying going on, that when people start to identify and they learn about their sexuality or their identity, they may move away from the church. But I also think what we have is a suppression of people's actual feelings in that regard because of the policies and the doctrines that are taught within the church. They don't feel safe to come out and actually identify as they might be feeling. So I think you have those two together, which would lower that number considerably from the reality.
Yeah, if you think about the church in the public sphere in particular, the church has filed a number of amicus briefs in a number of different jurisdictions, from Utah to Arizona to Georgia, to federal legislation, which has been introduced by Latter-day Saint congressmen. Of course, that particular bill did not go anywhere, but the church has signaled, at least in the legal and in the public sphere, they want them to have limited rights. That includes the church filing an amicus brief in the Cake Bakers, Colorado. That was called the 303 Collective, as I recall. But anyway, if you're a Latter-day Saint who sees what the church does both over the pulpit, which has an incredibly harmful track record of squashing LGBT, of demonizing, of demeaning LGBTQ persons, and also in the public sphere, in briefs and in in legal situations, you're going to see that this is not a welcoming place for LGBTQ persons. And that is borne out, not just by some anecdotes, not just by somebody's opinion. That is by the verifiable facts of this survey. Only 3% of people, which is extremely low, want to affiliate themselves with the church once they come out as gay. And that is much lower than the general population. And there is a number of reasons for that. The survey doesn't get into the reasons, and I guess I can't prove a causation. But to say that this is a safe place for LGBTQ persons would be considered quite a bit of a stretch.
And then the last thing that I would want to say on it, I think it was Bednar years ago, it's infamous in my mind because it was part of my deconstruction, and I believe it happened right around the same time, was when Bednar gave a talk. I'm going to summarize this. And he said something along the lines of, you asked the question, how many Mormons or how many members of the church are LGBTQ? And then he says, well, that's the wrong question. There are no members of the church who are LGBTQ. There are only, and then he went on to talk about this narrative that you aren't this, you are actually just being challenged with this. This is a challenge that you've been given and a temptation. That whole idea, I think, is what is the idea and the ideologies that's making people feel like they can't really speak out and say, and here we have a prophet of God telling them that this is the way it is. And if you're a believer, you take that in and you say, okay, I guess I won't identify because I'm a member of the church. I'm just challenged with this temptation.
If you think back to President Nelson's young adult devotional in 2022, and in my opinion, Shane, the young adult devotionals are really the most important addresses by the senior leaders of the church. That was his famous address where he said that you are not supposed to label yourself at all. You're only supposed to call yourself a disciple of Christ, a son of the covenant, and a son of God. Those are the only authorized labels that you can give yourself, because any other label could, quote unquote, take you off of the covenant path. So the church doesn't want you to identify yourself as LGBTQ, whether you are or not. And that makes it so that LGBTQ persons are leaving the church in droves. And it's going to be a systemic and long-term problem for the church, as we've seen survey after survey, including at BYU, where more and more people actually affiliate themselves with that community. In fact, at BYU, I believe it was a survey last year that said up to 30% of BYU says that they are not totally straight. So as we see society entering more of the LGBT sphere and the church not going along with them, you're going to see a wider divide, and it's going to lead to fissures in the church, both from the conservatives in the church, from people like Greg Mattson and Jacob Hansen, the right-wing members of the church, and the progmos of the church. And that's why we saw a few weeks ago, I guess it was a couple of months ago, where Jacob Hansen and Jim Bennett had such a clash. Doesn't seem to be any reconciling between the two. And that's going to lead to a lot of fissures in the church. Any last thoughts on this particular survey here, Shane?
The only last thought is that these kinds of things really strike a nerve with me, because we're talking about people's identities when it comes down to it. And the church, among its top priorities in terms of an institution trying to maintain control over its believers and hold them into the belief system, controlling their identity and ability to freely think about, choose, explore their own identities is one of the strongest psychological holds that we can have on people. And so when we talk about these issues and we look at these surveys and we see that we have a high correlation of the ways that people's identities are being controlled here, and it's clear from the data, it should be clear to everyone what's going on, that it's a strategy from an institution that's trying to hold you into those beliefs and lock you in there.
Speaking of the LGBTQ community and the church's difficulties in working with that community, we've seen at BYU here just this last little bit, Elder Holland's famous Musket Talk becoming required readings for BYU incoming freshmen or first-year students. And we got a couple of reactions from that in the BYU sphere, including this one here that I found on X that says, it'd be great if BYU admissions office would just start taking a closer look at applicants before judging their potential for apostasy, before giving a spot to an undeserving student, taking the spot away from a faithful student. That reminded me of OG Cowdery on X as well, who quoted back on that and said, starting this fall, admissions to BYU will be based on the average rating by a group of TBMs of the applicant's last testimony. It's like, we're trying to not only regulate human behavior, we're really talking about intrusive thought control practices. And that's a level of intrusion that is really Orwellian.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing more to add on that. It just seems straightforward.
Let me give you another one from BYU here, and that's from Thoughtful Faith as well, because of Elder Holland's infamous Musket Talk, which has received a great deal of blowback. He's retweeted the Cougar Chronicle, which is the BYU's conservative newspaper, which is in somewhat opposition of the Daily Universe, which is already a very conservative paper, but the Cougar Chronicle is really, really right-wing. Anyway, they tweeted this out here that says, apparently some of the BYU faculty and admins are, as usual, bending to the mob. When your admins are afraid to share by the words of the Lord's apostles, why should we have any respect for you at all? If you cave on this, you'll be dead to me. And that's speaking of the LGBTQ issue that we talked about earlier, meaning that if the conservative members of the church, they're tweeting out that if there is any caving, if there is any mediation, if there is a retraction in the conservative aspect of the church, especially at BYU, that they will leave the church. In fact, Jacob Hansen has said that specifically. And that's why the Cougar Chronicle tweeted this out, to express your support for the implementation of Elder Holland's address to become mandatory for BYU freshmen, go ahead and email the following addresses. And my understanding is that they've received a high volume of mostly positive emails. And that's a big surprise to me.
Especially when we're talking about how many people recently, when you were talking about identifying as non-conformist to the binary structure of sexuality at BYU, and now you have this many people sending in the support. It just goes to show once again that like if it comes from one of those top leaders, people are just blindly saying, I guess if it's from a top leader, this is God speaking and we need to follow.
Yeah, there can be no loyal opposition within the church, as President Oaks has said, and as Elder Corbett has said, any activism against the church, which he calls ATC, that is also from the devil. So there can be no, it kind of reminds me of Boyd K. Packer talking about the dangers of the church being the homosexual community, which is what his words were, and also intellectuals. And we're seeing that friction at BYU very particularly. And I saw this tweet also from this week here that talked about that. It says, hey, do you plan to apostatize if I recommend your admission to BYU? And her response is, well, hey, aren't you supposed to be able to discern that to begin with? Why do we have such Orwellian thought control when it's supposed to be discerned?
This reminds me of when the church started. This was years ago. The church started, and it actually was the root behind the gospel topic essays, when the church started realizing, hey, maybe we don't understand perfectly what is being said. And it seems like we're making mistakes when we assume and discern what we should do here, because we're getting a lot of pushback, right? The age of the internet has changed the game. And so surveying their members, their believers, and even surveying outside of their believers, trying to reach out to their dissenting population to try and understand better. It's always interesting to just take a look at that. It's like, why are you surveying if you have God's discernment? This seems like an unnecessary effort and waste of resources.
Well, it does remind me that Scott over at Ramyumptum Ruminations last year, he had a 2-part series where he had an interview, a deep dive with one of the church's sociologists who they have in their research department, who frequently sends out these particular surveys to members to query them on all manner of different issues, everything from their experiences in the temple to how often they go to church to how often they pay tithing and things like that. And that is rolled up and then briefed to the Quorum of the 15, as we saw from Mormon Leaks back in 2013, I believe that it was, in which Elder Gong and others is briefing these rolled up information to the Quorum of the 15, and they are using that information. Now, whether they actually, pay attention to these emails that come in and the boots on the ground, as it were, we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, because one of our featured news articles talks about that as well. Shane, there's just one more thing light on BYU as well this week that I saw that I couldn't believe here. Coming in the spring, Shane, of 2025, BYU Athletics is excited to invite you and your family to sail with us for the first ever BYU charter cruise exclusively for Cougar Nation. This is going to be on Royal Caribbean Navigator of the Seas, up to 3,000 passengers. You're going to be able to rub shoulders here with Coach Sataki, Jimmer Fredette, and many more BYU legends for the ultimate BYU event, plus celebrities, entertainers. Well, this is really going to be something. It's sailing from Los Angeles here next year in April. Shane, have you bought your ticket?
That just goes without saying. Do you think if I bring my patriarchal blessing, I can get a signature of Jimmer Fredette on my patriarchal blessing? Is he going to be signing autographs?
I'm not too sure about that. But, in the coordinating instructions on this, I imagine that they're going to say that everyone needs to show some respect, and please only bring one-piece bathing suits. Am I right?
Yes, of course. No, that should also go without saying. I'm curious if the cruise line knows what's coming. Has the cruise line adjusted their inventory for this cruise, right? Like maybe a little bit less alcohol on this one and a lot more dirty Dr. Pepper ingredients?
Absolutely. In fact, they're probably going to lose a lot of money, because I think the average cruise person spends a lot of money on cocktails. They may end up losing a lot of money on this particular cruise.
For sure. All they need to do is just have a bunch of monsters. If you can get like some monster drinks in there, then I guarantee they could make up for those sales real quick. They could sell them for $5-6 a pop.
You do need to be careful, because if somebody spies you sipping something that you're not, Shane, I imagine that a quick email or phone call will be made directly to the Strengthening Church Members Committee. So you really need to make sure that if you're doing that, they should be around 3:00 in the morning when nobody's around. Am I right?
Yep, definitely. That's how I would have done it when I was a member. Absolutely.
And there's one more BYU thing that's hit the news this week as well, because obviously BYU is basically like one of the church's most important things. So we definitely cover BYU every week on the Mormon News Roundup. And that's a Black student at Hawaii's Mormon school says that he's fighting in order to cut his hair. So what's going on at BYU Hawaii, Shane, with regarding to the so-called honor code and keeping your hair at the correct length?
It seems as though the BYU honor code, I don't know if there's a committee or what that's making these calls, but There's a student who they feel he should cut his hair. And is there a mention directly of cornrows specifically in the article?
Yeah, that's what his hair looks like here. You can find it in Mormon News Roundup. We're on Apple. We're also on YouTube. We're also on Anchor. But if you come on over to YouTube, you'll see the picture here of Mr. Cannon Barton. I hope I'm saying that right here. But yes, he does appear to have dreadlocks, which is against the haircut policy at BYU Idaho. He's fighting that, Shane.
Yeah, I mean, according to him, this is part of his cultural heritage. And I think the church of all organizations should understand the importance of tradition and cultural heritage when it comes to how you look and dress. And so it seems strange in this moment. I sure hope that they reverse this decision and think a little bit more deeply about what this means for how they're enforcing the honor code. It seems to be a clear contradiction in the values that are being represented here.
Yeah, the article brings out the fact that at BYU, in an internal study that the church itself published, it said that many students who are Black or Indigenous or other people of color said that they felt isolated and unsafe as a result of their experiences with racism at BYU. And there's just a strong urge, Shane, I'm sure that you're aware of conformity in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You need to look the look, you need to talk the talk, you need to walk the walk, and any dissent is to be squelched, whether it's the tiniest difference in students. If a student has cornrows or if a student has dreadlocks, well, when I look at the picture of the Quorum of the 15, Shane, that's not what I'm seeing. And we need conformity above all else in the church. And this is just an example that even though this is this young man's cultural heritage, I believe that he's Afro-Guyanese and Black American. Well, that doesn't conform with the church's tried and true 1950s Mormon missionary clean haircut IBM look. Therefore, he's going to have the kibosh on him.
Yeah, the church is in a really tight spot these days because they're trying so hard to present to the world that they are an institution of diversity and an institution where all are invited of all walks and all places of the world and life. But when it comes to their policies and it comes to their cultural direction and decisions like this, it seems clear that they're trying to squash any of that diversity, any of that, the all walks of life idea, right? You need to conform to what we see from the top 15 and down. And the closer you get to that top 15, the more conformed you see all the looks and all the walks of life become. I grew up in a version of Mormonism that it was white shirts and a dark tie. And then later on, when I got the priesthood, I was to wear a dark suit, white shirt, and short, well-groomed hair, no beard or facial hair. When I was in college, all of that. Once I started taking a more critical look at this, I realized this institution just wants me to look like those guys up there. Like, what's going on? It's definitely something that they're going to have to face at some point, that these archaic policies where we try to control the narrative to look or control people's expressions of identity to look like those at the top is just not going to last long.
Really, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there's a great deal that really isn't all that important to being on the quote-unquote covenant path or securing your exaltation or even having a relationship with God whatsoever. It's really about conformity and obedience. A perfect example is the fact that coffee wasn't enforced from the church, from the Word of Wisdom, from 1830 until about 1920. And coffee, we've determined from studies and from many studies have shown that is really quite good for you, and tea as well. And so it's not about what is healthful, it's not about what looks good. It's just, are you willing to bend your will to the Quorum of the 15, to the people who are ruling the church from North Temple Street in an outdated 1970s office building? Are you willing to do whatever they tell you to do? And every little step of the way in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is just reinforcing your obedience to them. In fact, from the article, just one last thing, it said that he met with one of the vice presidents for student life, and he said that he needed to cut the locks off of his hair because they were, quote unquote, a distraction, and that he was trying to push his own agenda and be defiant, even though he said that his locks mean something to him. They're part of his culture. They're part of his family. And those are things that are not tolerated. And whether it's the Quorum of the 15 for the men, if you look at the general women's presidency and the advisory councils for the church, you'll see that there is a certain Mormon look that goes along with the women too. We don't call people into the general presidency of the church who are very, very heavy, or are slightly disfigured, or are persons with handicaps. There's a look for the men, there's a look for the women. If you depart from that, you're being defiant and you're taking yourself off of the covenant path.
In practical terms, the way to see what you're talking about is the fact that you can Google a look and see consistent image results should demonstrate enough. If you do an image search and you say like Mormon missionaries or whatever, boom, you're going to get a consistent set of results there. If you Google, this happened just recently. Someone asked me on one of my TikTok lives, what do the Mormon female missionaries look like? I said, Google it, Mormon female missionary, and boom, you get a very consistent set of image results. And it just goes to show that this is playing out in reality, and people can see that there is a conformity that's happening by the policies and the ways that we enforce them. This is just an in the weeds example of that.
And it's really hard if you don't fit that Mormon mold. If you're transgender, or if you're gay, or if you're tall, or if you're short, or if you're thin, or if you're heavy, whatever it is, if you don't fit the proper mold, then you're not in conformity with God, and therefore you're a bad person. I just want to show you, for example, the Young Women's Youth General Advisory Council here, which was called last year in September. And you will see that there is a curated look that goes along with this advisory council. They've all got the hairdos. They've all got the perfect makeup. They're all relatively thin. There's nobody here with acne scars. It's a very curated look, and that is to be also followed up. I used to, Shane, be in the orchestra at Temple Square, and you'll see that they brought the makeup people out. It's all about the appearances in the church. And that can have a devastating effect on people who can't fit the stereotypical mold. And I just hope that BYU Hawaii will really take another look at this and figure out what is important here. Is the actual hair length something that we need to be discussing? It's getting bad press for the church. The church has had a number of bad press incidents in the last couple of months, and this has been a tough year. Is this where we need to draw the line in the sand? I really hope not.
Yeah, totally with you on that.
Now, I also came across this week, Shane, from the Deseret News, which is the church's arm for its media. Of course, the church has the Church News, KSL. It owns Deseret Communications, which is the parent company, I believe, of the Deseret News. And they always have a faith-promoting story or two every single week. And the fact that President Biden is now the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party for his reelection, they want to run a Mormon story that's related to him, which is kind of tough because he doesn't really have that big of an LDS connection, considering the fact that he's a practicing and apparently a devout Catholic. They managed to drag one up here from his luncheon that he had with the Irish Prime Minister on Friday, because, of course, President Biden does have Irish ancestry, along with, by the way, Joseph Smith, who's also has Irish ancestry. Anyway, President Biden, he recounts receiving family history from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints a couple of years ago. I believe that it was. He was at a dinner with Orrin Hatch, who's now passed away, and also Senator Smith from Oregon, who both of those are LDS. And they said, you know what? Hey, President Biden, we want to do a background for you. We want to check your genealogy and tell you all about your Irish ancestry and how it started off in New Orleans. And we're going to give that to you. And President Biden really appreciated that. Seems like a good faith-promoting story, which is what you typically get from the Deseret News. The only question that I have for you, Shane, on this is I wonder if Joe knew what has already been done with his family history and the real reason that Latter-day Saints maintain his genealogy. Do you think he knows about that?
I don't see anything in the article indicating that they informed him of that. And knowing the church's history and how well that they are at informing you of all things, informed consent is a major problem for the church. I have a feeling that if they follow their same patterns, that they probably did not inform him, that they would have gone ahead and already done some baptismal work for his deceased ancestry.
I very much suspect that you are right about that. And I also wonder if he already knows that his son, who died by suicide a couple of years ago, has almost certainly had his baptism for the dead done, his endowments done, his initiatories done. I wonder if they told him about that, considering that celebrities and well-known people, Shane, typically have their temple work done on the very first day that it's available. That way, Latter-day Saints can brag to their friends. I wonder if President Biden knows about that. And guess what? The article, it doesn't bring that up, does it?
Nope, doesn't bring it up at all. You don't typically share the side of the story that might make someone uncomfortable. And so I have a feeling that they probably did not fully disclose to Joe Biden the reasons behind why the church is so interested in family history.
I do also wonder if President Biden knows what we're going to do to him about a year after he dies, is that we're going to do his ordinances as well to ensure that he can become a Mormon in the afterlife as well. Did Orrin Hatch, did Senator Smith, did the people in the church's family history department, also known as the genealogy department, a few years ago, did they inform him of that? Making sure that President Biden knows the appropriate signs and tokens. But luckily for him, not the blood oaths and the oath of vengeance that people used to have to do back before 1990 and back before 1935. Luckily, he doesn't apparently need to know those. Did they inform him of any of this, or is just a faith-promoting story about how Joe Biden loves the Mormons? Is that what we're going to focus on here?
I mean, this would have been a really great opportunity to ask him for his permission. Here we are talking about this belief that we have and what we do. And this is our typical procedure when someone dies. We were wondering if we could baptize you a year after you've died. Would that be okay? I didn't hear him do that. It seems to me like that this would have been the perfect opportunity, since they're already talking about it, to explain why they do this and tell them that it's already been done for his prior ancestry, and that when you die, we'd like to do that for you. May we have your permission to do so?
That is an absolutely fantastic point. In fact, the church could have asked President Biden in writing, can we do, I believe it is Bo Biden, can we go ahead and do his temple work? But the church doesn't believe in asking for consent from people to do temple ordinances, which has got the church in a great deal of hot water in times past from doing baptisms for the dead and other proxy work for Holocaust survivors, Confederate generals, and Nazi SS soldiers. And in fact, these have been done for these Holocaust survivors on multiple occasions, having names run through many times. Shane, just an anecdote myself. I never really told this story to anybody before, but I myself in the Provo Temple sealed Albert Einstein to his parents. The famous Albert Einstein, the theoretical physicist and one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. And at the time, I thought, wow, this is a great honor. I'm making it happen for Albert Einstein. How lucky am I? But it turns out that very popular celebrities and well-known persons, they end up having their temple work done for them multiple times over. One last thing before I let you have the last word on this, Shane. I do wonder if President Biden is actually popular enough to get his work done right away after he passes away, because some past U.S. presidents were left to rot in spirit prison because the current Mormon leaders at the time, they didn't like them enough to actually do their temple work for them. They were that petty, saying, we don't like you, so you're going to have to rot in spirit prison instead of doing their work right away. Do you think President Biden is going to be popular enough to get his work done right away?
I mean, at the end of the day, there's going to be some people that will probably push for Biden because, we have a little bit of a mix, even though when you're looking at majorities, he's the unpopular candidate. So it may end up just being like temple worker roulette. If Joe Biden's name comes through, maybe it's going to come right down to that temple worker. And if that temple worker who's working that day feels the spirit to not do this one and sets it off to the side, or to do this one. So like many things in the church, it's just going to come down to the roulette of the moment and the person who gets to make that final choice.
Yeah, I did watch an episode of Mormon Stories wherein a temple worker had alleged that up to 30% of the names in all of the temples are just repeats that are passed around from temple to temple. I can't confirm that, but I have heard that anecdote a number of times, that much of the work in the temple is completely redundant and totally wasteful, and that is to put it mildly. Shane is on TikTok. We're also on TikTok, the Mormon News Roundup. Let us know your thoughts on President Biden and his temple work, his genealogy, his family history, and how the church has attempted to paint that in a positive light, apparently without the president's consent. We'd be very interested to hear about that. Now, before we get into our featured news article, Shane, I've got one last article here for you, which really got me going, because you've heard of the CES Letter, Shane. What is the CES Letter, by the way? It's kind of famous out there.
Yeah, you bet. CES Letter stands for Church Education System Letter. Jeremy Runnels is the author of the CES Letter. And he wrote a series of questions when he was going through his own faith crisis deconstruction, because the CES director at the time had said to him, hey, just put all of your questions together and then come to me with all of them at once. So he did. And then this ended up being a very long process for him, because he realized that the more questions he asked, the more questions it produced. So he started compiling a file of all the questions so that when he went to the CES director, he could have all of them there and not miss any, because he was just following the instructions, right? And so then that produced the original document that we now know as the CES Letter. Jeremy Runnels, in general, is more of a reserved person. He wrote this fantastic document, and this document has served so many people in helping them through their deconstruction of the Mormon faith, as well as beyond that. Since the CES Letter, he really only occasionally contributes when there's changes that need to be made because it's a living document. But he himself is not someone who's making TikTok videos or doing podcasts like we're doing right here. And he generally saves his comments for maybe just like the top most important things.
Well, that's an excellent summary. And the CES Letter has been instrumental in a number of people leaving the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's a very important document, historically speaking, especially in the last 15 years. Now, as you mentioned, Jeremy Reynolds almost never tweets. He almost never posts on Facebook. And I follow him, but he almost never does anything. And I almost wondered if he didn't do anything at all, because I believe it's been over a year since he last made a tweet or a post. That's why this caught my attention quite a bit. And this was on March 20th, where apparently Jeremy Reynolds is tweeting this out. He received an email that is an apology. And it says, "Mr. Jeremy Reynolds, I've been meaning to email you for some time. My name is," and it's blanked out here, "but back in 2019, I was involved in helping the production for some Fair Mormon videos that attacked you and the CES Letter. Those videos were called This Is the Show, TITS. And the letter goes on to say, what I did was wrong. Being a part of a production that attacked you and the CS Letter was wrong and cowardly. I am deeply, deeply sorry. If I could go back in time, I would have declined the invitation to act in those videos. It's something I deeply regret. And I need to admit that at the time of my involvement, I just read the script that was handed to me." And he continues on, and it's seems like a very heartfelt letter of apology for participating in those very divisive videos that were eventually taken down because of a number of factors that seem to have done far more harm than it did any good. And people are speculating here, Shane, as to who it is that has written this letter, because the personal details are redacted. What are your thoughts on someone having a change of heart and attacking the CS Letter and Jeremy Reynolds?
The first thought that most people will have is, wow, what if it's one of the frontliners, right? What if it's one of the people who were in front of the camera speaking to the microphone? It sounds like this person was reading from a script, so that indicates to me that it's someone who was likely on camera. That narrows the field quite a bit, because there weren't a lot of people. Because my first thought was, oh, it could have been anybody from the production side. It could be post-production, right? But this person said, I was just handed a script. And that to me, like, makes the field pretty narrow. Who are the ones reading scripts?
Who indeed? And that's what it says. "I'm truly sorry for what I did. You're doing an important work. You have my absolute respect. During my transition away from the church, the CS Letter opened my eyes to things that I've never heard about. It has helped me leave the church behind rather than getting caught up in scrupulosity and fear. Thank you for your earnestness and bravery in writing it." So the big question here is, who was involved with the TITS videos? It was really, to my understanding, only a handful of people. You had Cardinellis, Brad Whitback, and you had Kwaku. And it seems impossible that Cardin could potentially pen something as eloquent as that. And it seems unlikely for Brad. And it seems like all roads here are leading to Kwaku, who has really moderated his views in the last few years and has become far less dogmatic. And in fact, if you think back to those Jubilee debate videos between Mormons and ex-Mormons, honestly, Kwaku was the only Mormon, in my opinion, who did a half decent job of trying to defend the church. So that's what everybody's wondering. Is this Kwaku or not?
In those videos that you mentioned, the half decent job in defending the church wasn't truly defending the church. It was more actually focusing on trying to build bridges of understanding. And to me, I noticed for the first time in Kwaku in those videos that there were some moments of give. And that's just not something that I had seen before with his on-camera persona. If I were forced to guess, let's say, then that's probably where I would send my estimations.
Just like the CES Letter tongue-in-cheek suggests, Shane, we'll have to bust out the Ouija board and see what the answer is. That's I do wonder. Shane, that does take us to our featured news article this week, which is far and away the most important news article of this week. This one really went viral, not just in the LDS community, not just in the ex-Mormon community, but this received a wide traction. And this basically was summarized here by the Salt Lake Tribune pretty well, I think. Again, their crack reporting over there is absolutely excellent. The LDS Church gives more power to women than any other religious organization, leader declares.
This article header is the fact of the matter. But when you read it, it looks like clickbait. It reads like clickbait. And even outside of our small audience here in Salt Lake City or Utah, it's going to look like clickbait to like anybody else, but it's not. That's what's fascinating about this story, is the way that reads sounds like someone's trying to pull a dirty clickbait move on you, but it's not. This is actually a factual statement.
Now, here at the Mormon News Roundup, we would never clickbait anyone for extra clicks. That much I would say for sure. Okay, maybe we would. But yes, that's right. It does sound clickbaity, but that is the actual quote itself here. And I want to play a couple of clips. We have a number of reactions here. We're going to give a deep dive into this incredibly audacious claim about women in the church and the Mormon patriarchal power structure. Okay, Shane, so let's hear from Annette Dennis herself here and the particular clip that's going so viral from the 182nd General Relief Society meeting that just took place last Sunday.
There is no other religious organization in the world that I know of that has so broadly given power and authority to women.
Roll the tape.
Tonight we share in the ordination of Stacy D. Cram to be ordained as presiding bishop and counselor to the president of the church and member of the quorum of the first presidency.
But Nemo, she spoke to that.
There are religions that ordain some women to positions such as priests and pastors, but very few relative to the number of women in their congregations receive that authority that their church gives them.
So what she's saying is that the LDS Church gives more authority to women per capita than any other religion, if not the same kind of authority that other religions do. Well, Community of Christ have been ordaining women at the local level as deacons, teachers, priests, and so on since 1984.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to demonstrate the fallacious claim. Look at I don't know if it's probably not the most recent branch off, but maybe the most successful and by far the most rational branch off of mainstream Mormonism. We have people being ordained. And what's really, really effective about that video from Nemo was the fact that he showed an ordination, hands being laid on the head of another and transferring that authority and call it into that position, right, to a woman. And that just is going to feel foreign to a believing member of mainstream Mormonism today. They're going to see that as wrong. That's when that's when the red flags should go up in their head, and the cognitive dissonance is going to do its job there to protect them. But such a powerful video to demonstrate that what she's saying just plainly and clearly since 1984, we have one example at least where that's just totally not true.
Yeah, she's talking about any other religious institution. Shane, since when does the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints compare themselves to anyone? Why does there need to be a comparison here if this is the Lord's one and true church?
Yeah, exactly. The Mormon church doesn't care. In fact, they have already set the precedence for themselves that they would always be a peculiar people, right? So why is it that all of a sudden they're trying to compare themselves to the others and they're trying to conform, I suppose, with the rest of mainstream Christianity and try to say that they're better than them in this regard?
Yeah, let's not forget that at this General Relief Society meeting, which is the biggest meeting of the year for LDS women, who was presiding over this meeting, Shane, that she said that she had more power than than any other religious institution. Who presided over the General Relief Society meeting? Is it safe to say that it was a man?
Who was presiding? I actually don't know the name of the man, but I can guarantee it was a man. But I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that it was a man.
I don't have the name right off, but I will put the name here below when we release this episode live on Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when you can come into the Mormon News Roundup on YouTube and interact with your humble hosts. Now, the church, even after this Relief Society meeting, I don't think that they really realized how controversial of a statement this was, because they posted it out on Instagram. And that received a huge amount of traction, receiving up to 13,000, or even at the time of this broadcast, almost 15,000 comments alone, which for a church post is a significant amount. And what we saw after the church posted it on Instagram really caused even more controversy here, Shane. It's because they removed 8,000 comments from this particular thread, all of the heartfelt opinions, most of them which were in opposition to what Sister Dennis said. They were gone. They were silenced. If there was anything they could do to validate the concerns of those who posted, this was it. The Mormon Church seriously despises women. Can you believe this, Shane, that they deleted the comments allegedly off of the Instagram page?
It seems strange to me that usually I look at the Mormon PR department, and I usually look at what they're doing and think, gosh, that was smart, or man, they're making all these moves. It's always to my chagrin, right? Because they're just strategically manipulating people, right? But it's always really smart and strategic PR. This is a moment where it seemed like they completely forgot what it means to delete, 8,000 comments, and what kind of backlash you're going to get from that in today's political environment, when we're talking about people's rights to speak up, and we're talking about platforms on the internet that could be removed because there's just, and a lot of people's opinion on that is that because, hey, the people are finally talking to each other. This was the wrong time of all times in church history to go and just delete people's opinions and people wanting simply to be heard. And the fact that it was from members and non-members alike made it even worse, because now you're creating a unified voice among those who had their comments deleted. So this just seemed like a complete PR disaster, which usually, a PR disaster from the church for me is a surprise.
I do wonder, where is Aaron Sherinian in this entire thing, the new church's PR director, who was brought over from Philip Morris? Wow, okay. And then also from the Deseret Management Corporation, he's been installed as the church's PR man back in January, I believe that it was, and he has not made one public comment. Is he behind the scenes on these Instagram posts? If so, he hasn't been doing a very good job. Now let's cover a couple of other tweets here that came out around this same time frame of the alleged Instagram deleted posts in regards to women having more authority in the Mormon Church than in any other religious institution. And White Cat Prophecy, who we had on the Mormon News Roundup about a year ago, tweeted this one out. It's hard to find a better metaphor for how little power the Mormon Church gives women than deleting the comments from its own members, mostly women, that argued with the church's post about how much power it gives them. And again, this is that viral quote here, Shane. There is no other religious organization in the world that I know of that has so broadly given power and authority to women. Talk about marginalizing the already marginalized.
One of the biggest problems I see with this, and I'm just now realizing this, the terms that were used here, power and authority, because those in the church, especially the term authority, it is directly and objectively defined for the most part. When you're talking about church policies and doctrine, authority is the power given from God. The priesthood is defined as the authority from God. And so, man, I almost wonder if the PR department should have just changed the phrasing here just to avoid this disaster. But they chose the term authority, which is a direct correlation over to the priesthood. And we can clearly say, no, they don't have the priesthood. No, they don't have authority, because we all know, we've all been taught and conditioned to believe that the authority of God comes from having the priesthood, and women just objectively do not.
Right. So what the church's new PR spin on this basically is from President Nelson, who wants to rebrand how it is that we talk about authority in the church. And no longer is the church supposed to say, I hold the priesthood, or you don't have the priesthood, or he holds the priesthood, or she doesn't have the priesthood. Now it's rebranded to having access to the priesthood. And that's why Sister Dennis says that she feels so empowered, is because she has access to more power than any other organization because she views it as being synonymous with her herself having the power. That's the rebranding that President Nelson wants to take the church through. And as you can tell, that kind of, I don't know if you want to call it politically correct language, it doesn't do much for most people. Shall we put it that way?
It's too slow for, so here are some Shane 101 thoughts on what's going on here. The church is currently in a place where it's the top leaders, I guess you could say, it's currently in a place where it's conflicted between a changing environment, a rapidly changing environment, and a world changing faster than it ever has before, to put it simply. And they're conflicted with making any kind of change because it would disaffect and hurt and feel like a betrayal to the older generation who still remembers the ways that it was taught and was so unchanging for most of their life. The younger generation will probably embrace this change no problem. So they're trying to split this difference between these two different bodies of experiences that they've created for these two different generations. And so they're trying to shift by opening up access to and say that women have access to the priesthood equally as men do, but they can't just come out and make the real change that needs to happen, which is simply start giving the priesthood to women, because that would just rattle the core too much to those who are, who were raised in a way where it was just men and women, and men get this and women don't.
Yeah, if you think back to Elder Bednar at the National Press Club briefing back in May of 2022, he was asked specifically about women ordination in the church and whether there would be a president of what the reporter called the Church of the Latter-day Saints. But he said that we follow the pattern that is in the Bible. And we don't stray from the pattern because Jesus called 12 men, therefore we call 12 men. That tells me that the church leaders are in no way, shape, or form pondering over this particular issue. It does not trouble them one bit. They have not consulted with the celestial dictator in the sky to figure out his opinion about this. They are just read a 2,000-year-old book, and that's what's in the book. So yes, I don't see much change that is going to be happening in the near future on this particular topic. Let me give you a couple other Twitter reactions to take you through here as well, Shane. Number one, from the Reformed Mormon. I'm no PR savant, but it seems to me that deleting hundreds of comments from women expressing that they do not feel empowered by the LDS Church is probably not the way to prove them wrong. It'd be funny if it wasn't so sad. How about this one? The church just didn't delete thousands of comments on this post. They are actively deleting the new comments live. Comments aren't lasting longer than a few minutes. The church has zero interest in women's voices. And here is that particular Instagram post right here with the caption that there is no other religious organization in the world that I know of that has so broadly given power and authority to women. And a couple more takes here, Shane. I just noticed that the artwork that the church used for that post, I know the artist very well. She is like a second mother to me. She is far too benevolent to publicly be upset about this, but I doubt that she loves this. And in the meantime, her son has some thoughts, and the son's thoughts about this is, when I look at the faces of the women in this painting, I feel like they're rolling their eyes at this quote and enjoying the embrace of their friends. This painting isn't about a church. To me, it's about women loving each other and connecting. So if you do look at the pictures here, it kind of does look like they're throwing some shade on the quote in particular. It's kind of there's an incongruous level of this entire thing. This is the irony. This is just a PR disaster.
I didn't plan on saying this, but I know the artist personally as well. I know her son also. And I agree with the poster. The poster, based on what's being said there, does appear to be someone who is close to both the artist and her son.
Well, that's interesting here. I did also track down a little bit from the artist herself about this incredible controversy, because it has gone viral here. And once again, the Reformed Mormon tweeted this out, that the artist did indeed respond to the entire controversy of having her painting, which is really about empowering women, be associated with one of the most patriarchal organizations on the face of the earth. And this is what it said: you could give me 100 lifetimes and I would not come up with a more compassionate, inclusive, patient, and generous response than this. I need to be more like Kathy. So KB Peterson, is that who we're talking about here, Shane?
So yeah, Kathleen says, I often choose women as subject matter for my work. I like to paint them because I know women from firsthand experience, and I love the intuitive nature of women. This painting was inspired by beautiful and powerful relationships I have experienced with my female family and friends, and that I believe uniquely happen between women. All the comments on the church's post, quote, or that uses this art, show how women support women.
So what are you taking away from what the artist said about her painting being used for the church's controversial claims about women's empowerment?
I have nothing but the most admiration and respect and love for the artist and her family. She and her family have been nothing but kind and good to me. She has nothing but goodness that comes from her. And so 100%, and I think her words are chosen very carefully to bring it back to the inspiration for the art, which was women will support women. And so I think what we see is, if we're talking about the comments, and now I make no conjecture about where the artist is coming from, and if it does direct to this, but my thoughts now, I see that also. I see women supporting women in the comments that are surfacing. Believers, non-believers, it doesn't matter. It's women who are speaking out for women because women know their experiences better than anybody else. And so I think her words are very, very wise, just like she is, and beautiful.
I really appreciate that take, and I'm glad to know that you are familiar with this particular artist. I was not before this particular posting. A couple of other takes here. After thousands of women's comments that gave pushback on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Instagram post with Sister Dennis' controversial quote, the church here, Shane, it actually officially responded, which for most people, that's run of the mill. If let's pretend that you had McDonald's and there was some kind of a scandal, you would expect the CEO or the senior leaders of McDonald's to come out and say, let's say that something went viral at a local McDonald's, that one of the workers was behaving poorly. They would say, we're aware of it. We're let you know. That's normal PR, is that you comment on things when there's negative press and when there's thousands of negative reactions, you comment. But actually the church, it almost never does. But in this case, the church actually responded. I guess ATC works after all with the church if you get enough mostly women's voices. But here's what the church responded on this particular Instagram post. It says the church's social media team acknowledges the numerous comments that have emerged in response to this post. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Your comments will be shared with church leaders who follow these issues. We, like you, strive to follow the example of Jesus Christ in our interactions, including conversations online. Shane, how do you feel about the church's official response to this PR mess?
It doesn't say much, to be honest. We'll share this up, but who knows what that means. It's obviously not an apology, but something I was thinking about before is that when we were talking about like permission that the church seeks to do people's temple work, right? They don't seek permissions to do the things that they think they're called to do by God. And as we know from Dallin Oaks, they also don't seek apologies. They don't give apologies and they don't seek apologies. And so I wasn't expecting any kind of apology, because they always think that they are right because they're speaking from their dogmatic position, that they understand and know what God wants them to say.
Right. And Dallin Oaks also said that he's not aware that the word apology appears in the scriptures. Hence, that's why the church does not do apologies. And we saw in that comment that they didn't say we regret anything whatsoever. They just said a PR department is aware of the issue. They didn't say who they would share it with. They didn't say that there would be any follow-up whatsoever. And if you think about the Quorum of the 15, actually, including the presiding bishopric, they all have official accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and on X. What they do is they tweet things out, and then they never, ever engage with the comments. If that's what you consider to be ministering, that is poor ministering to begin with. So there will be no accountability for this. There will be no one who's reckoning on this. And the church's own PR man, Aaron Sherinian, is AWOL on the job. And as far as sharing the concerns that these tens of thousands of mostly LDS women have with regards to their power in the church, saying that they're going to share it with leaders, it kind of reminds me of this one. And then we told them that your comments will be shared with the church leaders who will follow up on these issues.
I love it.
Don't hold your breath here, Shane, for any action to take place.
Nice one, Blue. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of other ones here. There's no other religious organization in the world that I know of that has so broadly given power and authority to women. People say the darndest things sometimes, because when you look at this org chart here, it's got, I believe, 109 men on it, and it has, I believe, 9 women in it. It's overwhelmingly men. From any objective perspective, from an outsider or even an insider, that is not an organization which would be valuing women or puts them on any type of equal footing with men. And I know in our pre-show call here, Shane, you talked about being gaslit in this particular issue. And that's what Nuance Ho tweeted out as well. She said, if I had the power of the priesthood for every time I was gaslit, I'd have 2 priesthoods. It's not a lot because I still wouldn't have it. We were talking in the pre-show call about being gaslit. Is this a prime example of something that's going to be changed later on and retrofit back to fit the church's positive narrative?
I don't know about that. We'll see. I think they're trying to just brush this under and get past. I would be surprised if another story pops up to try and divert attention or whatever. But yeah, in terms of like gaslighting, something I've observed since I walked away from the church is that the church generally has like these slow burn gaslight campaigns, let's call them. But then they also occasionally just run up against these moments where they make huge mistakes because they think they can just say what they think is true, and they forget to do a reality check where, and the reality check, as we've seen from these posts, is very easy. Hey, we're about to say that we give more power and authority to women than any other institution. Should we see if it looks that way to the rest of the world? Right? Like, let's look at our structure of leadership on our website. Should we go over to other churches and see if it appears the same way? And the image that we just saw, where we see 9 women with over 100 men on the leadership chart, should be that moment where they go, this is not going to pass the reality check. But once again, coming back to feeling like you can say what you think, regardless of how it actually is an objective reality, comes from a place of dogmatic belief. You just think, if we say this, it will be believed. Now, they do win over believers who are already in line with the indoctrination and that dogmatic place where they are speaking God's truth. Sure, but you're also cracking a fragment of them, because there's so much information out there. And someone who says, is that right? Why does that feel not right? And then they go and they do their own reality check. You're fracturing. All you're doing here is harm, because you're riling up the, call it opposition for lack of a better word. And you are also like stirring your believer base, and you're going to crack. There's going to be a shaving off of those people every time you do this.
Lest anyone out there think that the Mormon News Roundup is fake news, I did follow this all the way down to the conclusion of it. And according to a couple of different sources that are pretty confirmed here, the LDS Church has responded to the social media fallout, and it blames a glitch for the comments disappearance. This is incredible timing here, because apparently Facebook and Instagram went down at the exact same time shortly after this post. And hence, that's the reason that the comments were being deleted in real time, and that the 8 or 10,000 or 15,000 comments were deleted and then brought back up. This is unfortunate timing for the church, but it doesn't look like there was any nefarious intent from my perspective here, Shane.
Yeah, if the evidence shows that it is a certain way, then hey, I'm on board. And man, that was really unfortunate that it went down the way it did.
Well, let me play one clip for you, which is from Jasmine over there at Scripture Plus. Let's hear what Jasmine has to say about this entire controversy as one of the church's foremost social media influencers.
This post by the Church of Jesus Christ has gotten so much attention. There are more comments on here than I've seen on maybe any other post from the church. There were a lot of people upset that women in the church felt empowered. But we need to talk about the church's comment moderation on this one. They are not deleting comments, and I can prove it. After thousands of comments, the church made a pinned comment saying, hey, thanks for all of your input. We are listening. We are going to be sharing your comments with church leaders. But then immediately people were like, you are deleting my comment, though. The church responded with a story on their Instagram saying, yeah, the timing really sucks on this one, but we promise we are not deleting comments intentionally. This is a platform-wide issue, and they're right. I first noticed this glitch on our own podcast, Church History Matters, this morning, where on Instagram, some of these reels had done really well, but the comments were outputting 000. If you even go to major brands like Coca-Cola, same thing. And of course, when you go to Twitter, Instagram down is trending. So it's clear Instagram is dealing with some kind of glitch or bug or system-wide problem this morning when it comes to the comments. So regardless of how you feel about the actual post itself, I don't think the church is intentionally deleting these comments. I do think they're trying to listen. It's just honestly really bad timing.
Yeah, according to that, sounds legit.
It definitely does look like it was a system-wide issue because one of the CEO, I believe, of Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram's parent company, tweeted out that they were indeed having issues of that. I do find it remarkable that Jasmine doesn't really want to talk about the underlying post itself and why it found such a wide purchase, especially among women and Latter-day Saint women in general. Instead, she wants to just say, don't worry, the church is doing nothing wrong here, nothing to see here, without tackling the underlying symptoms of why this is such a disingenuous statement to begin with.
Yeah, maybe she'll do it in another post or something, which would be fine. I hope that all the comments are able to be restored. Do you know? I don't know what the current status is, if they've actually been restored or if they're just gone forever from the glitch.
I believe that they have been restored.
So the voices are heard once again.
You bet. Couple last takes on this, because like I said, this has gone really viral here. Here's another one from Nemo the Mormon about Mormon women are being the most empowered. Let's see what his take is on that.
The church has been facing heavy backlash on social media over this statement by Sister J. Annette Dennis.
There is no other religious organization in the world that I know of that has so broadly given power and authority to women.
But to paraphrase the temple ceremony, she is merely doing the same thing that has been done in other interviews.
In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, women actually do all the things that it requires a minister to be ordained in other churches. So we pray over the pulpit. We preach doctrine over the pulpit. We teach men and women gospel doctrine in various settings. At least 500,000 women right now are leading organizations for women, for the young women, and for all the children. So to be a member of the Savior's Church is to be a liberated woman.
You know, Shane, I just rewatched that just now, and a couple of thoughts came to my head. First of all, that she admits that the Relief Society has about 500,000 people in it. I believe that's what she said. Well, wait a minute. I thought that there was 18 million members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and approximately 53% of them are women. Where are the other millions? It seems to be Yeah, it seems to be a tacit admission that people like Randy Bell, who have postulated that there are only approximately 1 million active Latter-day Saints in the entire world and about 500,000 women, that is approximately accurate. What Nemo is pointing out here is that these are the talking points of the church. It's what has been called the illusory truth effect. If you continue to repeat something as many times as you possibly can, eventually people will actually be able to believe it. It's kind of like Boyd K. Packer, Candle of the Lord talk, where he said that a testimony is to be found in the bearing of it. This is getting dangerously close to brainwashing.
That's something that anytime someone deconstructs their religion, walks away and takes a critical look back at what just went on there. For me, it was at 40 years old. I looked back and said, what just happened those last 40 years? And it was clear that I was simply raised in a home that said, this is the way it is. Because when you're a child, you believe that the tooth fairy is real because you're told by your parents that it is. And thus it is with your religion as well. When your environment never changes from that, you aren't likely to change either. And so, yeah, if you repeat something over and over and over, it's obvious that people will start to believe it. This is just basic human psychology.
The memes on this are just incredible. And we got one here from the friend over there at Culch, who summed up some of the issues here with the fact that, don't forget, Shane, that this is the 182nd anniversary of the Relief Society's founding. And back when it was founded, it had so much more autonomy than it did now. All of those powers of the initial founding of the Relief Society have been stripped away, and no woman in this church has the final say for anything in the church. So let's see what Culch has drummed up for us to wish the Relief Society a happy birthday.
There is no other religious organization in the world that I know of that has so broadly given power and authority to women.
He spends the rest of this 2.5-minute video, Shane, going through all of the comments from people saying, this isn't April Fool's Day. This isn't reality. You should get to know more religious organizations. I couldn't disagree more. Sister Dennis, you need to visit some other churches. Women in the comments, they are standing up for themselves. This organization is not healthy for women. I've needed therapy because of the harmful effects of being a Latter-day Saints. You're invalidating people. You're gaslighting. You're not empowering anyone. You're appropriating a painting for a nefarious purpose. I've read my account. I've read the, this is 100% not true, etc., etc. These are the type of comments that people are giving in. This isn't just a couple of people. This is a huge swath of people who strongly disagree with Sister Dennis's characterization of the power of women in the church.
All of those comments, I just give a big old stamp of valid.
Stacker said, predictions on this. What do you think, if anything, will be said about this in General Conference, which is coming up shortly? Do you think that they are going to tackle this like any normal organization would say, hey, we've had some controversy, we've had some misunderstandings, we've had some gaffes in PR, we've had some lapses in the way that we talked before, and we've caused some harm. We want to make up for that. We want to address that. We want to hear you. We are going to look at this issue. We're going to return and report and bring further light knowledge that the Father was supposed to send to you. Do you think there'll be any accountability or mention of this in General Conference, or will this just be spread over like butter on a piece of toast?
Well, all of the examples that you just gave are examples of two-way conversations, right? You're asking questions. You're saying, hey, are they going to come up and say, how can we do better? We made this happened and we want to address it. What are your thoughts and feel? No, that's too much. That's two-way in the conversation. Communication from the church is unilateral. This is why we do every 6 months. This is why there's a general conference. They may take this issue and have someone be directed towards speaking in this direction in order to make some explanations and clarifications doctrinally based in order to set people right or give them the responses that they need when people bring up this certain issue. So it's believable to me that there might be a talk or two that address women empowerment in the church, and they're going to give and feed their believing body of members just the anecdotes that they need to be able to respond in the world to the criticisms that are coming in. That's what I expect in conference, if anything. But obviously, they're not going to be asking questions. They're not going to be seeking a conversation about this. Simply just, here's what you should know and here's what you should take away to help you survive in a world of criticism against our really crappy beliefs.
Well, it reminds me of the family proclamation when President Hinckley rolled that out back in 1995, I believe that it was, and he did so in the Relief Society session, the women's session of General Conference, and he did so without any input whatsoever from any woman, including his Relief Society general presidency. They were surprised and caught flat-footed and somewhat chagrined that he would do that, because information in the church is a one-way conduit from those of us who have a Y chromosome to those of us who do not. And the Reformed Mormon also tweeted this out on X, and I want to share a couple more. And that's, he said that saying women have access to priesthood power while simultaneously not allowing women any functional use of that power in the church is like when my brother would hand me a Nintendo controller that was not plugged in while he was playing Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I do that to my 3-year-old now, so that hits home.
Yeah, he has access to the game. He just doesn't get to play the game.
Doesn't get to interact.
Yeah, the cultural hall again. He always has the best and most amusing takes. I know this is a serious issue, but I try. I don't know. What can I tell you? I'm an irreverent soul at heart. And he tweeted this out here. He says, as a Mormon, I get asked a lot why women aren't allowed to hold the priesthood. And to that I say poppycock and refer to the pictures below. See, Shane, they're holding the priesthood.
There they are. Yep, they are all holding priesthood here. They're holding the priesthood.
Shane, a couple more. Maybe women are asking the wrong question. Maybe they should be asking why men didn't get the priesthood until 1830. This is a slight nod to Brad Wilcox, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yep, exactly.
Or how about this one? LDS members memorized the names of the Relief Society First Presidency after the embarrassing Jubilee debate. And now I know Sister Dennis's name, and I also know Sister Johnson's name. and I still don't know the second counselor, but I'm getting closer, Shane. I'm taking that to heart.
When people try to defend the way Joseph Smith was with his early polygamy wives, I asked them to name more than 3 of his polygamist wives, and it's just never done.
That does remind me that I've listened to most of the Air Polygamy, and I'm afraid that I still need to brush up on some of those things as well. A couple of more comments here from the exponent here that says that when an LDS leader says that women have priesthood authority, well, hey, I was outside in the rain because the brethren wouldn't let women come in. It's time we stop making excuses and ordain women to the priesthood, the obvious kind of priesthood, like real power in the church. That's a common sentiment that you're seeing with regards to this particular issue. And that does take us, Shane, to our Mormon News Roundup poll of the week. And like I said, we release new episodes every Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you come on over to YouTube, you can interact with your humble hosts. And what is the Mormon News Roundup poll of the week this time, Shane?
This week's Mormon News Roundup poll of the week is the top 10 ways to give LDS women more power in the Relief Society.
Yeah, for those of you in the live chat, be prepared to cast your votes at this time. And let's run you through 10 options here, Shane. And what's option number 1?
Option number 1 is give the Relief Society back their buildings, hospitals, and manuals. Whatever are we talking about there, do you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Relief Society in particular used to have their own food storage areas. They used to have their own hospitals. They used to have the primary children's hospital. And then when correlation came through, especially under the auspices of Harold B. Lee in the late 1960s, early 1970s, the church stripped all of those away and made everything in the Relief Society more subordinate to church correlation. So we could just go back. This isn't something radical. We should just go back to the way that it was just a generation ago. Or how about number 2?
Start the Relief Society magazine back up, free from correlation oversight.
Yeah, so there used to be a Relief Society magazine that ran for many, many decades. I don't remember exactly when it started, but it was around for a long time. And it was gotten rid of again in that same time frame in 1970, at the same time that the Improvement Era was renamed and became the Ensign magazine, as I recall. Well, the Relief Society magazine was also discontinued, and it wasn't replaced with anything else. It was just discontinued, and there is no Relief Society magazine now, Shane, because that would be something that women would be able to do on their own, right?
Yep, we don't want to give too much voice.
It's just like Elder Ballard said, when you're in those meetings, just don't talk too much. Straighten the brethren out and then move along. Women's voices are valued if they give brief insights, and then they are to be silent. Number 3.
Institute an opt-in, opt-out procedure for Relief Society membership.
So, Shane, you're telling me there's no opt-in or opt-out procedure for Relief Society membership?
As far as I know, you just become a member of the Relief Society if you're a member of the church at a certain age. It would be awesome if we allowed someone the opportunity to choose to be a member of the Relief Society. Not only would this allow people to leave the organization if they chose to later on, honestly, this is a benefit for the church. You would get more buy-in and ownership if you gave women the option to elect to be a member of the Relief Society. Having that buy-in would make them way more willing to contribute to the organization.
The moment that you turn 18 and you have 2 X chromosomes in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you're automatically moved into the Relief Society roles, and there's nothing that anyone in the Relief Society can do to stop that process, and there is no opt-out. You will be a member of the Relief Society until either your death, you turn 110 years old and have fallen off the church's rolls, or you have your membership removed. Instead, we could give women power to control who is in their own organization. Or how about number 4?
Let the Relief Society run their own conferences without priesthood oversight.
Yeah, did that happen at the 182nd conference here that just happened, Shane?
It did not. Apparently in the 182nd conference, wherein they pronounced that they have more power and authority than any other religious institution in the world, the meeting was presided over by a man.
Indeed that it was. And we could have, even on the local level, Relief Societies run their own conferences, or at the women's conferences at BYU, or at the senior general Relief Society sessions. Those could be for women, by women, presided over by women. A simple, small step. Or how about number 5?
Move the Relief Society out of an auxiliary organization and place it on equal footing with other priesthood quorums.
Right. So the Relief Society now is considered an auxiliary organization, along with a couple of the other auxiliary organizations, such as Young Men, Young Women. I admit that may have been changed here recently, but it's an auxiliary. It's not a primary. It's a sustaining organization like the primary, that doesn't exist in and of itself, but it has to report to other organizations in order to sustain itself. Or in other words, it doesn't have the same footing and organization as the priesthood quorums, right?
Right. It's kind of like an arm over here. Hey, you could be connected to us. Don't think to be part of the core system here.
Exactly. Or how about number 6?
Let women control the membership roles.
Yes, we kind of alluded to that earlier. And this is an old picture here, again, where the Relief Society used to have their own, essentially, bishop storehouses where they could, help those who were hungry or help, do things for the community. A lot of those things have been shut down. Or how about number 7?
Empower women to control their own budgets. I love these AI images, by the way.
Well, I fed the AI, said Mormon women controlling their own budgets, and this is what I got, Shane. So what can I tell you?
Makes it too easy. The AI knows.
A woman in the church does not have the final say in anything, nor her own budget, especially a Relief Society. They have to have approval for everything from a man. We could change that around and give them their own budgets. How about number 8?
Compensate the Relief Society General Presidency. I like this one a lot. It has become common knowledge now, at least I think. I don't know if TBMs actually know this still. I'm so far removed from being a TBM at this point that I don't know what TBMs know or don't know anymore. So that'd be an interesting thing to understand. Do TBMs these days know that the top 15 and even into the 70s, they are given a form of compensation? While they don't necessarily call it salary, they're giving a luxurious stipends and cars and benefits to being in their positions. Is the same thing happening for women?
It's very unlikely that the women in the church at the top level are compensated. They are considered general officers of the church, not general authorities of the church. And my understanding, and I don't know this for an absolute fact, is that they're only compensated in a similar way as mission presidents, meaning that their children can attend BYU schools free of charge. They're given basic reimbursement expenses for what they might have, and they're given just a very basic amount so that they don't lose money during their calling.
It's just an arm, guys. We don't compensate the arm the same way.
Exactly. Or how about number 9?
At the local level, encourage Relief Society presidencies to sit on the stands.
And this reminds us that in the Bay Area here a few months ago, the Relief Society presidents were literally kicked off the stand after they had been on that stand for, I believe, a period of 10 or 15 years as a tradition. And the area presidency came in and said that no, only men should be on the stand in state conferences in the ward level. We could throw that on its head. We could flip that around and say, hey, you know what? Not only can they be allowed to be on the stand, but they should be right up there along with everyone else. That way, those little girls who are in the congregations will be able to see people like them who are in positions of power.
It just seems to me like a policy that wouldn't exist in a religious organization that gives more power and authority to women than any other in the world.
Good point. Finally, we have number 10.
Let women choose their own leaders, free of male influence.
Right, because who calls the Relief Society General President?
Men.
Right, and who calls the Relief Society President and the other people in the Relief Society at the local level?
Men. They make the ultimate decision.
Absolutely.
It has to be run by the men first.
Exactly. So we could just have women who are ministering mostly to other women, also to other members of the congregation. We can let them choose their own leaders without a male having the final say. And that's take us chained to our Mormon News Roundup poll of the week, which is the top 10 ways to give LDS women more power in the Relief Society. And I'd be very grateful if you would be the first person to take our poll.
Let's make this not an auxiliary organization anymore. Let's make it part of the core leadership structure in the church. And maybe that's just a subtle move towards, then the compensation could come, then so many other things could maybe follow from there, but let's start with baby steps and stop calling it an auxiliary organization.
I appreciate you being the first person to take our poll. I will throw my name into the ring here, and I do believe that number 8 would be a symbolic victory for women in the church. That is to compensate the General Relief Society president, and why not the Young Women's president and the primary presidency as well. That seems like that would restore or get closer to some level of equality from what you called earlier is that the general authorities do receive compensation from the church. That is called a living allowance, which is somewhere in the realm of $140,000 per year, plus other benefits up to approximately $259,000 per year, according to the Widow's Mite report. And that does take us to our final segment here, Shane, which is the Mormon joke of the week. And you can take us out with this.
Yeah, you bet. So before I give you the joke that I have on my mind, I wanted to take a moment and actually tell everybody, if I have any followers that are watching, you know that I still haven't received a tattoo. I've been an ex-Mormon for like 7 years now, and I still haven't gotten my first tattoo, but I finally got my first tattoo. And so I'd like to do a tattoo reveal, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
This is fantastic. Now, this is a rated PG-13 show here,
yes.
So I just want to... Okay.
I kept it in a place where it would always be a PG-13. I just did it right here on the shoulder. Okay, so here it is. I actually decided to do a tattoo of all of the archaeological evidence for the Book of Mormon. And there it is.
I was about to applaud you for your bravery, Shane, but you did let me down just a touch.
Yeah, and that was actually the joke. So,
well, all I can say is that President Hinckley is very proud of you. That you still haven't gotten a tattoo, and that you have at least one ear piercing. President Hinckley is in favor of your current life trajectory.
Yes, that's right. Just one. Actually, I don't have any yet.
Thanks for coming on the Mormon News Roundup. I really appreciate it. Over there on TikTok, you've got this channel that's called Shane Deconstructs, which is absolutely fantastic. You're coming up on 1 million likes, which is about 900,000 more than I have. If you come over and view you on TikTok, what are you going to see in your channel? What are you working on, and how can people get in touch with you?
So you mentioned another influencer out there, Cultural Hall. I think he's fantastic, and we kind of have a similar vibe. I have always processed my trauma, regardless of what it is, through humor and joking. It really helps me to like pull back from the pain or whatever it is that's hard in the moment. If I can step to a place where I can look at this as a joke or make a joke about the situation. And so that's how I have approached my religious deconstruction as well. It helps me a lot. It's very therapeutic to joke about things. So if you go to my Shane Deconstructs, my TikTok page, which is just Shane_Deconstructs, you're going to see satire. You're going to see me joking about, culture of Mormonism. And in all of it, I'm just making fun of my prior beliefs. And so that's mostly what you're going to see. You'll see occasional serious videos where I do a take or a hot take, but mostly it's just, hey, let's walk through the absurdity of all of this and let's laugh at it. And if you find that therapeutic, then hop on board. That's what I'm here for.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Shane Deconstructs TikTok channel. I cannot more highly recommend you to my humble viewers out there. So I really appreciate you coming on. And for those of you out there, if you want to support this podcast, you can make a small donation over to our Patreon channel and view these full episodes free of YouTube ads. And there's a bunch of extra bonus content out there. I'd like to thank our Patreons, Anonymous, Anthony M, Colette L, Wendy, Michael L, Eric, and Sophronia.
Also, if you end up becoming a fan of my content, then you might be interested in my merch store. It's very limited, as you can see. My biggest seller is this right here, the delicious to the taste and very desirable mug. You get 2 mugs for $16.66. That's 1666. It's just a lot of fun. One of the things that I do on my TikTok videos, one of the more popular series of videos, is taking some of the phrases of the temple and putting them into regular day life to try and like troll your Mormon friends. And so those mugs work out great for that. They work out great for like white elephant gifts or whatever. And so, yeah, if you are interested in supporting, that's one way to support me, is to go to tenderluckies.com and buy some merch.
Now, as far as the projects that I'm working on, Shane, I run the Mormon Movie Reviews channel, which is every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We review an old LDS classic. And tomorrow night, we're going to be reviewing How Near to the Angels. And this is with my occasional co-host, Rebecca Biblioteca. This is a fascinating look at LDS movies. This one is from 1956, way back there. And your synopsis of this one is that Janet is a Latter-day Saint who wants a temple marriage, but her steady boyfriend, Kent, is inactive. While Janet attends a church fireside, a young Mormon man named Tim introduces himself and proposes suddenly. Tim's mission president told him to get married within 6 months of coming home, and now Janet faces a tough decision. Now, one of them is inactive. He is a member, but the other one is a returned missionary. Okay, so they're both members. That's why it's such a love triangle. It's a fascinating look at LDS culture back in the 1950s. This is a really old movie, and it's really fun to sit down and do a watch party with us. No spoiler alerts here, Shane, but this is a church-produced movie where we want to have one inactive member and one active member. Please like and subscribe to the Mormon News Roundup. Give us a thumbs up and leave us a 5-star rating. We'd be very grateful for that. I want to give a shout out to Weird Alma on bandcamp.com for this episode's music. And thank you so much, Shane, for ruminating with me on the great and spacious beehive. And remember,
No unhollowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.